Hindustan Times, 31st of July 2023, why does China always view developing India in a hostile manner? To stop the people of the Indian subcontinent from flourishing and being forced to submit to hegemonic China, China has been conducting an all-out war against it. Chinese diplomats advise their Indian counterparts not to bring up boundary disputes with Supreme Leader Xi Jinping continually. When the issue of the border is brought up, the standard response from the Chinese leadership to Indian leadership is that boundary disagreements should be put in their proper place and that the two countries should cooperate in normalizing their bilateral relations in other areas, which is part of Chinese attempts to undermine India from within. This is also code for telling Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi to engage Chairman Xi Jinping in constructive conversation rather than bringing up the boundary clarification each time they meet. As Emperor Xi wants to rule the globe, he has more critical global matters on his mind than the India-China border dispute. Even then, Prime Minister Manmohan Singh recognized this when he first met President Xi in March 2013 on the sidelines of the BRICS summit in Durban. President Xi has little time to settle territorial disputes or other significant irritants in bilateral relations, such as China's upstream construction of dams on the Brahmaputra in the Excellent Bend region of Tibet. It is believed that on his first meeting with the Indian Prime Minister as President, Eleven was somewhat aloof and had little time for Indian problems. The very next month, the PLA and the Indian Army engaged in a standoff in the Depsang Bulge region of East Ladakh, south of Dalit Begoldi, and the PLA denied Indian troops the ability to monitor 1976 designated points within the Bulge area or from patrolling points 10 to 13. The PLA once more barred the patrol route in May 2020 as the Chinese army engaged in an aggressive incursion in the Galwan, Kugrang Nulla, Gagra Hot Springs, and Pangong Tso area of East Ladakh after the patrolling rights to the Depsang area were restored in 2014 to 2015. The PLA claims that the Indian Army's dispute over patrolling rights in Depsang is a 2013 legacy issue, although it hasn't been settled as of yet. The Charting Nilong Nulla, CNN, Junction region in Dimchok is the same way. In September 2014, when Prime Minister Modi accorded Paramount Leader Xi the red carpet treatment in Gujarat, his home state, the PLA violated in the Dimchok and Chumar area, sparking a major standoff with the Indian Army. While Indian Army commanders there claim that the PLA restricted Indian Army patrolling rights from 2005 to 2007, the Chinese Army's stance on CNN Junction tightened in September 2014. The rights of the Indian Army to patrol CNN Junction have not been restored as of this writing, and PLA commanders are still disputing them. In this light, it is essential to keep in mind that all 65 of the patrolling locations designated by the Indian Cabinet Secretary in 1976 fall squarely inside India's interpretation of the line of actual control in East Ladakh and have no bearing on China's claims to the same lack. The Chinese approach to border settlement is downright flimsy and deceptive. Despite the PLA amassing some 50,000 troops in East Ladakh with rockets, artillery guns, and tanks in the western sector and inducting about 6 more combined armed brigades in the eastern sector. When Prime Minister Modi meets with the Supreme Leader, who may feel it is not worthwhile for him to address this urgent matter and prefers to keep the boundary pot stoked, he always insists on clarifying the lack because he understands the importance of the situation. While China claims that India should not let boundary disputes sever bilateral ties, the reality is the opposite. Beijing has taken an aggressive stance against India on almost all fronts, except a few concerns affecting emerging developing nations. Think about this. To provide Pakistan, a recognized nuclear proliferator and client state of China, the same status as India, China prevented Pakistan from joining the Nuclear Suppliers Group, NSG, in 2016. One must remember that China was the source of Pakistan's 1990s nuclear missile systems and technology acquisition via North Korea. China has repeatedly prevented India and its allies from having the 1267 UNSC committee designate the most feared international terrorists located in Pakistan. With the blood of thousands of innocent people on their heads, names like Masood Azhar, Rauf Askar of Jaish-e-Mohammed, and Sajid Mir of Lashkar-e-Taiba are considered members of the jihadi royal family. However, this is not all. Chinese efforts to get innocent Indian engineers working in pre-Taliban Afghanistan labeled as international terrorists were also supported by the Pakistani deep state. These actions at the UNSC were stopped thanks to the US and France, close allies of India. China made a concerted effort to get the UNSC to pass a resolution opposing India's decision to abolish Articles 370 and 35A from Jammu and Kashmir in August 2019. They criticized the new map and labeled the region as disputed because it showed the UTs of Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. Another issue is the Chinese government's insistence that everyone adhere to the One China policy, which recognizes an independent Taiwan Republic. In 2017, the PLA violated the Doklam Plateau on the India-Bhutan-China Tri-Junction on orders from President Xi. This move would have severely jeopardized the Indian security of the Siliguri corridor or Chicken Neck region. The PLA would have reached Jampheri Ridge and taken control of the entire Siliguri corridor without Prime Minister Modi's quick decisions and General Bipin Rawat's quick deployment. The Chinese are still moving through Amachue and Bhutanese territory even though the standoff has been resolved. Thimphu is still blissfully unaware of the threat and is celebrating its happiness index. The truth is that China has attempted to isolate India at every chance it has had, whether it be through the construction of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, which passes through occupied Kashmir in the northern areas of Pakistan, surveillance radars to track Indian missile tests on Myanmar's Coco Islands in the Bay of Bengal, ballistic missile tracking ships and submarines at Sri Lankan ports, or by seriously undermining the political systems of Nepal and Bangladesh through suitcase diplomacy or financial severe influence. In other words, China has decided to use the boundary dispute as a constant means of destabilizing India, blocking any action enabling India to occupy its proper seat at the international high table. As the returns are pretty considerable for advancing the viewpoint of the Communist Party of China, Beijing uses the Chinese supporters in India as multipliers. It is essential to remember that George Fernandez, a former NDA defense minister, came dangerously close to being hanged by Indian media nearly 20 years ago for bringing up China's presence in the Coco Islands and its potential threat to India. Atal Bihari Vajpayee, the prime minister then, came under fire from leftist parties and media for blaming China in a letter to the UNSC for the Pokhran II Shakti series of nuclear tests 1998. The Chinese government's public statements and actions are invariably opposed, and Prime Minister Modi is fully aware of this contradiction. India's remaining alternative is to increase its military capabilities and capacities while preparing a counterattack in the Indian Ocean and the North.